Welcome back to ShredMentor Live. I'm your host, Jason Aaron Wood, and this is episode 39 already. And by the way, very sorry to bail on you last week. Unfortunately, I was sick for an entire week, and I have no idea with what. So that was a lot of fun. But I am functional again, and so that's what matters. So I thought we might dig into some of what I did spend what time I could doing, and that is writing melodies. I think it's really important to get out of guitar exercise mode, probably a lot more than you would think, when you're trying to improve your guitar playing and your overall musicianship, because it's not just all exercises. So if everything you do is mostly exercises, it becomes kind of one-dimensional, and you end up forfeiting some benefits in a lot of areas at the expense of, by doing that one exercise type of thing all the time. So trust me, your abilities will get better if your imaginings get better, and that's what I'm going to help you with tonight. Okay, so I don't have any intro section at all prepared for you. I'm just going to dive right in. And for once, I actually have a very long list right next to the camera where you can't see it, but we're going to get into everything so that I can, I'm going to cover everything, I promise. So grab your guitar if you didn't already, and we're going to start doing cool stuff. Now, before we do that, while you're doing that, I'll set the stage a little bit though, okay? So when writing melodies, okay, I've said this in many episodes before. Let me switch over to the control panel so if any comments are coming in, then I can see them. And let me know if you can hear me, because that would be great if you can actually hear everything I just said. But as I've said in many past episodes of ShredMentor Live, writing means recording, okay? When a song is written, you don't know about it until it comes out, okay? It doesn't really exist until we can hear it. And that is why it's important for you to get in the habit of putting your stuff in a recorded form. You're not releasing it right now, don't worry. You might feel like, well, I'm not ready. I know you're not ready. That's okay. If you're still ready, if you're still working on how to write melodies, you're definitely not worried about this right now. If you want to improve your melody writing, however, that's still, you need to be doing this. Recording isn't for when you're releasing albums only. It's also so you can interact with the music, because until you're doing that, it doesn't matter. I have full faith you'll understand what I'm saying, but you're only going to understand it until you hit that wall, because that wall is real life experience. What happens when I start having to problem solve with this? Until you're doing it, you're not going to understand it on the level you need to be able to instinctively use music as a language, okay? So keep that roadblock in mind. My poor desk here is bearing the brunt of the metaphor. Okay, anyway though, so what we're going to start with, okay, and a couple of, first of all, recording software. Okay, tonight I'm not using recording software. I'm going to be using a backing track. Okay, and that's going to supply what we need. It's just really hard for me to figure out how to set up the audio routing to do this live. But at some point I'm going to do this in one of these sessions with my actual recording software, so you can actually see how I interact with the ideas. I just have to take the time to sort out how to work it and still have you hear my guitar and all that stuff. But anyway, not happening tonight. So anyway, you need to have some recording software. So if you're not doing it already, go download Reaper, or open a separate tab in your browser and go make a note to do it tonight. Download it. You can install it tomorrow. I know it's getting late in some areas of the world here, but you need to have at least something like Reaper. It's free to download and install. It's free to use for 60 days. There's no handicap on the software after that. You need a thing that can do multi-track recording so you can interact with your ideas. There's no way around it. You must do this. And you, of course, therefore also need an audio recording interface. You don't have to break the bank, but don't get something from Creative Labs either. Don't get it from like Micro Center. Get it from like a, I hate Guitar Center, but get it something like a Guitar Center, or a decent music store in your area. I personally use a PreSonus audio box because I was tired of spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on stuff that I didn't actually need from like M Audio. I used M Audio stuff for years, and I think their quality just went over the years. But I kept thinking, that was just a dud. They'll get a better one. And I kept getting things that had recording interface, like too many inputs. I thought, oh, I gotta have at least 4 inputs. Why the hell I thought I need 4 inputs? I don't know. I just thought, well, maybe I might need it. Gotta have it, right? No, I don't. I haven't needed it. I've been using 2 inputs on the same interface for 6 years. 6.5 years now, actually. I don't need it. I just need 2 inputs. And it's a MIDI in and out. That's it. So something basic, $100. That's all it needs to be. And a half-decent computer, to be honest. Okay, so make sure you have that. That is first. That has to come first, because you're writing melodies that you can then, you need to be recording it so you can listen to it without having to play it, because you need to free up your concentration to be able to hear what's actually going on and not have to be, you know, actually executing the melody yourself as you do it. So it's very important. So don't neglect this step. The next thing we really need, once it's open and all that stuff, is a rhythmic context for what you're about to do. Okay, so, you know, a lot of people will just grab a guitar and just start playing. I'm guilty of it. I do it too sometimes. But I have habits now, because I do so much recording, that it generally does have a rhythmic feel, because to me it's going to feel like an incomplete melody if it doesn't have an accenting pattern and a feel to it. That's not most people's habit. All right, so you know, I'm aware of that. So I'm going to help you make very clear decisions from the start so that what you're doing actually goes somewhere. And the last thing, of course, is to have some kind of an underlying starting chord in mind when you go. I mean, you don't have to know what the chord progression is necessarily. You don't even have to have a chord progression to start with a melody. You can write a great melody, and the chord progression can come from the melody. It's fine. But have an idea of which chord this first note is sort of happening within. Okay? Preferably which chord and in which key that chord is, because it's not always the root note chord that starts the song or the chord progression. Sometimes that might be the second or third or fourth chord. You might not actually have it even in the chord progression that you're starting in. You know, you might be an E minor, but there might not be an E minor chord in that entire thing. You're just using the chords from the key of E minor, and you'll get around to an E minor chord later in the song. That can happen. It does happen from time to time. It's not the most obvious thing to do, which is why it doesn't happen as much, but it does happen, and some, you know, good songwriting will show you how that kind of thing can work. But you know, that's a byproduct of being a good songwriter, is not needing to go to the root chord first and last constantly, right? But anyway, we'll do that anyway. We'll just use the root chord, because that's probably a good place to start, frankly, for what we're going to do. So anyway, that's the 3 things you need. You need a rhythmic context. You need an underlying starting chord in mind, at least, so the harmonic context in which your melody is happening. And of course, you need an actual recording program to make this happen in, so you can at least just go on another track so that you can hear how your melody actually works against that. Okay, now tonight I'm going to be using guitar practice tools, so that is ta-da, right there. All right, and I'm going to be doing mostly stuff within a rhythmic context at first, but that will be using these practice beats. Okay, and as you can see, I've already got one grayed out because I was jamming for a few minutes beforehand. It's super slow tempo, but oops, let me refresh that, because that's probably not even the right page anymore, and I don't need to be on my own email list. You need to be on my email list, but you know, I already know what I'm sending out. All right, so this, when we get into which harmonic context, the context of which chord is happening in the background at the time, this is when we're going to use these. I know it looks exactly the same as the last screen, but these are drones. These are single notes that sustain for 10 minutes. And that's how I'm going to fill in those gaps by having that going on. It might be a little bit of audio chaos, because I'm going to actually have the audio coming from 2 separate tabs at the same time at certain points here. But, or maybe I won't, we'll see. We'll see if that's actually necessary. But anyway, okay, I'm just going to go right here to 4/4/16. And the first thing here, I'm going to just illustrate that when I created the topic for tonight, for this show, I kind of really did have vocal melodies and guitar solos in mind, mostly, okay? But just based on some things I've been kind of doing throughout the week too, something actually I finally got back to recording last night, I'm going to actually illustrate one particular other area where this can kind of work, and it can be to specifically connect chords, okay? So I'm going to start with this 4/4/16 things, but real quick, I'm going to show you what the chord progression is, and then I'm going to show you what I actually did to it to add melody to it. And it's maybe a stretch to call it melody, but it is melody because it creates a sense of up and down, and it creates a connecting quality between the chords that don't really go together. They're purposely all chosen not to be in the same key. So it's C sharp minor, A minor, F minor, E minor, E flat minor, B minor, and then G minor, then back to C sharp minor. Okay, all very dark chord changes that don't happen in the same key ever. None of those, from one chord to the next, every one of them is a key change. And it's a very black metal style thing to do, and it was actually meant to be fairly black metal anyway. But that's roughly the pace. It's actually 72 BPM, but 70 will do. Okay. So what I ended up doing, I ended up using the bass note. I did pad these chords quite a bit with some actual strings and stuff in the actual mix. But I ended up connecting them through a chromatic pattern. All right, so I'll start with 70. Now here I did a different. Yeah, so that was where I used a more chromatic stuff. So the E minor. I held the B out a little longer. So I'm gonna break down some of the stuff I'm doing there, okay? Because this is a pretty relevant thing for adding melody, or at least some amount of sort of counter melody within your rhythm parts. This probably would work well if you're doing like a 4 guitar kind of thing, so 2 just heavy power chord kind of things on the hard left and right hand, and then also doing the chords on maybe some thinner sounding guitars just to sort of add, you know, that nasty black metal-y. So you might just do that. And let's just let that happen on the other guitars, or if you can jump in there quickly enough, you can do it. But something just to make sure that they're nice and big and full as well, because these chords can kind of thin the sound out a little bit, so you might want to bulk it up just by having just... All right, so it's in 4/4, and I'm kind of following a 16th note pattern. So this is where that rhythmic context comes in a little bit. What manner in which the rhythm is moving along kind of dictates a little bit about how what you're going to play needs to kind of fit into time. So I just went with a straightforward, just 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a, and when I came to 4 E and a, that's my 4 E and then the last note is actually the new chord. So I just started my C sharp, which is also, that was the root of the original chord. So for 3 beats, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and just, I could have done it that way too. I just wanted to be able to hear, I kind of wanted to hear that in my chords, so I did it that particular way. And it's the same exact thing. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a. So I kind of need to be in quickly on the palm muting too, just to get the right chunkiness. But that. See, I can get away with these melodies being chromatic though, because it's almost got a little bit of a dizzying effect because of the fact that you're not keeping track of where you are in one key. You're about to change key every chord anyway. All right, so I did that for all of the ones where the chord itself moves to another minor chord 2 whole steps down. Okay, every chord is to another minor chord though, so that's, you know, that's not the only criteria. It's anytime if you want that dark, sinister sound, just take any minor chord, move down 4 frets, and play another minor chord, or 4 half steps, okay? or up 8 half steps, either way. But that's, you're basically moving to the minor sixth of wherever you are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. C would normally be a major, you play a C minor, starting on E in this case. Okay, so just because of that, because of the distance, hey, I have 4, basically the note I started on, 3 notes in between, and the one I want to finish on. It's almost like it's asking to be like 4 E, and so that's sort of where that kind of came from. But if it had been, you know, if I wanted to go 5 frets down, I might have gone like 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and E, well, sorry, 3 E and 4 E and you know, so you can use chromatic stuff like this. You just have to, this is why the rhythmic context is so important, because you need to take rhythmic inventory in a way. How many beats, how many notes do I have? And if I want to play all of them in a row, what beat does it need to start on? Right? So I could have also, if I'm going from E to B, that's down 5 frets from 7 to 2. Right? So it could be a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and then just not repeat the original note like I was, because I was doing original note 2, 3, 4. Right? But if I don't want to do that, 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and I can start on the note right below it. It will still have a very, you won't really notice the difference. If the interval starts to get wider than that, you might even want to try just a different kind of melody in this case, like, or start from somewhere else in the key so that it lands you on that other chord differently. So I'll get to that one later. But for the most part, any of these, all of the chords in here, as I said, if I'm going down a major third to another minor chord, I just do it. There's another one, B minor, for the end. All right, so the big difference here in this case are 2 places where I'm moving down a half step. I had to come up with something different that would work. So I want to show you what I did with that and what the thinking was in that, because they're not related to each other by being in the same key, but they do have notes that are near each other that can sort of operate as like a pivot point between one key and the next. Okay, so when I get from A minor to F minor, F minor, so 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4, and so it's like I'm using the root and the second, but then I'm going down to E, which has an E one. It's almost like I'm treating it like it's like E Phrygian for a second. So it was able to sound very natural at that point, and also break up the monotony of everything having to be like, you know, I don't have to do that every single time. It's already threatening to maybe be a little bit old because I do it so many times in the riff. But that's one way I can kind of do it. So. And so I did actually still use a chromatic run after this to go from E to E flat. But I ended up, instead of descending from the same root note, I went up to the minor third, 3, 2, flat 2, root, and then I just did it down there. This is sounding a little heavier. But anyway, so there, so and that way I can take advantage of my 7th string and get those nice lower kind of things. But I could have done it melodically, it would have worked just fine in the higher octave too. So if you don't have a 7th string, it doesn't matter, not important. So after that, it's, you know, now I'm at B. I did it again. Now here's the one last thing I did here, because now I'm going from my final chord, which is G minor, to a C sharp minor. So you're doing a tritone type thing. So in this case, I just grabbed a single chord, all right? And what I did was basically took my G minor, D, I went up to its 5th. Okay, so I'm kind of grabbing the nearest strongly related note to it to sort of reconcile. That, at least since like Merciful Fate, early Merciful Fate days, that kind of, I forget, was that one of the early, I think, stuff on something on the Melissa album. But anyway, you can just always just do that. As understanding Black Sabbath. You know, that's, you could just go straight ahead with it, but if you want to sort of usher in the new chord in a way that's like, ooh, okay, that kind of really worked melodically. I basically did that. In fact, I did the D an octave lower. Right? So this is more of a riff and chord progression kind of way of doing it, and your melodies are all in a lower range. But I wanted to kind of start here because this is also a very important place for melodies to take place, and I'm using a scale that most people kind of purposely avoid because of the fact that it isn't inherently into the coven. I think maybe. Yes, I think you're right, Matthew. Actually, that does sound like Into the Coven. That's the right one. I know that's essentially where I define my starting place there, but that's basically it, yeah. Yeah, that sounds right. I think it's Into the Coven. Thank you. Yes, I'm almost sure you're right. So anyway, yeah, that's a very common way that you can get from a given chord to its tritone, is go to the fifth rope, make a quick stop off at the fifth, and then do that. It's basically having from E to B, and that's just the same thing here, basically. You can kind of do that like it's each root, fifth in the bass, now go flat, fifth of that in the bass, flat. So it's a really useful pattern if you want to move through tritone changes like that. So anyway, thanks, Matthew. Yeah, I'm sure you're right now. That's the one. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some more like vocal type melodies. Okay, so I'm going to jump right ahead to the very last thing, though, because I'm going to tell you, since I just talked a lot about chord changes, okay, I think it's very important that we do, this is like cheating, because it's supposed to be about melodies, but your melodies are going to be a lot more interesting if your chord changes are interesting, okay? So, not saying that you got to go outside the key all the time. Personally, that's where my tastes usually drive me to go, but, doing something interesting once in a while, that's maybe borrowing from another key, or at least something from, I don't know, harmonic minor, or use some cool stuff from like Neapolitan minor, like the Neapolitan flat, let's see, the Neapolitan 2 chord, okay? It's basically where it's almost like Phrygian, but it's like harmonic minor meets Phrygian. It just allows for some, so it would be like something, all right, so if I'm in E minor, that would be like, that suddenly it's almost like you're in Phrygian. That's where you have the flat 2 chord as a major chord, but then you go to your 5 chord, and that's major. Right. So something that's just a little outside of just regular old major and minor can add a lot to what you're doing. So, yeah, keep that kind of thing in mind. It's a little cheating because it's not, I'm not just talking about melody, but to be perfectly honest, I mean, interesting melodies don't just exist by themselves, it's very, the way we think about melodies is like they're separate, but they're not separate from the harmony, okay? Like, let's see. And as we wind on down the road, Our shadows taller than our souls. Yes, that's the part you sing, and the voice can do single notes at a time only, unless you have weird capabilities and you can sing more than one note. Then I'd like to meet you. But really, you know, it's a single note instrument, the voice. But that's not really what's going on at the end of Stairway to Heaven. It's and as we burn on down the road, our shadows taller than our souls. That melody isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening within a context. The melody is part of the harmony. It's not just in addition. We always like to break things up. It's black and white, super separated. Well, there's the melody and there's the accompaniment. That's a perfectly fine way of breaking down what's going on in the song, but that's not how you understand why that melody exists and why that happens that way. It's a vocal melody, so the notes are close together in the scale. But the notes that are happening at each time happen over fairly fast-changing chords. It's an A minor, you're starting on an A. And as we wind down the road. It's the root note as the melody, but it's no longer the root note of the chord. That's the root note right there. I'm playing the third. The third. The melody note is the third of the chord by the time it actually happens. So it's the melody in the scale is 1 1 1 3 2 1 7 1. And I'm grabbing. I'm sorry if you hate Stairway to Heaven or something like that. It's just I know it. I think you know it. I think you've heard it enough times in your life. It's a safe melody that it's famous enough that I can just grab it and use it as an example, right? But that melody doesn't happen by itself ever. You know, maybe when you're singing it to yourself by accident or whatever, or, you know, without the rest of the song there. But in the song, the idea is inextricably tied to the chord changes themselves. It starts off locked into the harmony. It veers off once it gets to the G chord. It's actually kind of like a sus4 thing going on. Then it resolves back to being a major. That's the third of the chord. Down the road. So you're following the thirds in your melody of the chords that are playing at those times. All right, so it's the idea is tied to the chords. It's built on the chords, and it would only work because of the chords. The melody might need to be different if the chords were different. Okay, so anyway, that's just something to keep in mind, that your chord changes, there is no separate harmony and melody. It's all harmony, unless it's truly the only thing happening melodically at all. All the band drops out and you just have one instrument playing, fine, the melody is separate from harmony. But as soon as another instrument enters, and then there's harmonic context. So anyway, that's the big thing. I know it's cheating, but get a good, interesting chord change going, and you'll be able to do a lot more with your melodies. But anyway, I know that's been the first half hour. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this, okay? So how to get more interesting melodies. And I say more interesting because I know that most of us are guilty of just basically just, or worse. And that is what your melodies, you know, might very well be. I know that is, I think probably everybody's guilty of having done that at one point as what comes out when you pick up the guitar. All right, play me melody. Oh, okay. All right, so first of all, let's get away from linear melodies, okay? Not that you never do them. Just kind of go out of your way to purposely randomize the order of the notes. Not purely randomly, but a degree of randomness. Okay, so I talked about an underlying starting chord. All right, so this is where these drones are going to come in. Let me just start in. I'm going to do a lot of stuff in E minor tonight. So I'm going to start with E, assuming that's the first chord. Oh, we can hear that. Okay. So, yeah, non-linear melodies. Okay, I'm not purely random. I don't want to just play whatever note. I want to stay in key first of all. I also want to pay attention to the chord. I'm in the key of E minor. This would be the E minor chord playing in the background. So I want to sort of favor the notes in the key that make up this. So I started on the 4th, but I resolved it to the 5th right away. Simple. The notes are kind of linear, right? Yeah, got a little less linear. I went up past the note and came back down to, you know, so kind of somewhat pentatonic, but a little out of order. Root, 3rd, 4th, raise, go to the 7th rather, and then come back down to the 5th. There's another one, right? 3rd. I'm already within the harmony of the chord. Root, 3rd, and 5th are my 3 hot spots. All right. So if I'm playing the root, the 3rd, or the 5th, I'm already on a safe note that if I wanted to, I can just land there and stay. Right. It will not be much of a melody, but it's a place to start. 3rd, root, 2nd. Now I'm in a tense place. It's not resolved. 4, 5. I keep choosing the 5 just because it's a nice place that feels final. Let's move the idea up and do another technique is call and response. So, a couple of things I did there actually, because I also used a little bit of a rhythmic pattern in there too. Right? It's kind of like 1 E and 2 E and It's on the 1 and the of each beat, right? So, that was my original thing. 3, 1, 2. So I'm just kind of working my way around. I chose a note that's in the chord to start with, but after that it's just I kind of want to start high, go lower, and come up to a note lower than where I started. So I'm going to ascend to a note lower than that, descend, and then ascend again. So I kind of want to make this sort of starting point, come up but not as high, come up but not as high. So I'm visually thinking of it. So that's another thing is these are all sort of combined together here, but what I'm paying attention to, I'm giving you a visual here. Here's my high note, and then I'm going to come up but not as high, and then I'm going to come up again but not as high. That's called the melodic contour, the up and down of the melody. Actually, that's really what it's actually called, the melodic contour. And that is the, if you saw sheet music and just played connect the dots with all the little note heads, that's what you would get. It's watching the way the melody goes up and down, and suddenly big peaks and valleys and stuff like that. It only goes up and down, but you have quite a bit of variation in how far it might go up and down, and how many times in a row it goes up versus how many times in a row. So you can get very creative with the more visual side of it. And I know we're not paying attention too much to what it looks like, but when it looks interesting, it often sounds interesting. So if you put some effort into what the shape of the melody is actually going to be, it gets a lot easier to come up with something that sounds interesting and meaningful right away. So that right there, I just kind of, I followed a similar criteria there. Start at a high point, come down lower and ascend but not as high as where I started. By itself, maybe that's fine, just that could actually just work fine by itself. The fact that I did it again though, right? Start high, come down lower and ascend but not as high, and now do it again. That is the thing, and then putting it into a rhythm pattern. Right? And that's just the original idea. So then I went in and I did call and response. I did the same exact idea, I just moved the whole thing up one note in the scale, and I played it first. So instead of 3rd, root, 2nd, I did 4th, 2nd, 3rd. And instead of 4th to the 5th, I raised it from the 5th to the 6th. So it was the exact same thing, just everything's one note higher in the scale. I didn't transpose it, I actually moved it to the next mode up. So really it might have been better to actually have this over a different chord, like the C chord. This could have been another chord that C is in, like the A minor. So it starts on an A, and it resolves to a note that makes it sound like A minor, and then once it gets back to E minor, look at that. None of those were the pinch harmonic I envisioned. Anyway, so hey Vicky, horns up to you. Hopefully that wasn't too long. I kept you waiting there. Hello. Thanks for joining me. Also, Vicky is a DJ on Metal Devastation Radio on Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. She does Lady Red's Bath of Blood. You should check it out. Again, at metaldevastationradio.com, so don't miss that. Anyway, so yeah, there's a couple different things I'm kind of pulling together as I'm doing this. Right, I've got call and response. I'm paying attention to the melodic contour sort of right away. I'm using some sort of rhythmic interest by just putting it into a basic rhythm pattern. I'll do it one more time with the actual beat so you can kind of hear which beats it's actually happening on. I think it's pretty clear what it feels like anyway, but where the accents fall, just to be abundantly clear, that's going on there too. And I'm doing some kind of non-linear melodies. Yes, I'm using, it's almost impossible to avoid notes that are right next to each other all the time, but sometimes, you know, when you can, try to do some wider interval jumps, because a wide interval jump is more surprising. The melodies that we learn at the very beginning of our lives are usually melodies that have all the notes right next to each other. You know, Mary Had a Little Lamb is all just, it's the notes are immediate neighbors within the scale, and it makes it easy to sing. Now, I mean, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star being the big exception because it jumps straight to a fifth. Okay, you know, I mean, little kids don't usually nail the singing on that anyway. They're usually nowhere near the actual notes when they're singing it, but, you know, that is the one exception to most of the types of melodies that we hear. And I mean, and my kid will watch cartoons, so I hear other melodies intended for kids, and they tend to do the same thing. Singable melodies in general, even later in life, still tend to be notes that are near each other, okay? But, you know, as much as, you know, Somewhere Over the Rainbow in Wizard of Oz. It jumps an octave right away. I'm playing an octave higher than it was sang, because that would have been kind of weird if Judy Garland did that. But anyway, yeah. Jumping an octave directly is not really the easiest feat for most people unless you have some practice singing. I usually need to warm my voice up to do that, so I get mixed results. Because you're jumping to it, that's just a different part of your voice. All right, so it's not, whether you're trying to be a singer or not is really not important here, but it's not. You got to remember that the voice is the natural instrument every single person is born with. So in a way, it's sort of the basis for the mind, the way that we think of melodies and the way we relate to them, and how well we can sing along to them ourselves if we're just casually humming along to them. So I think it's important to remember that when you're going to go for a wide interval. Now, I mean, when you're just making music for someone to listen to, screw them, they don't need to sing it, especially when we get into more complex stuff. But think of a perfect fifth is about roughly a good place to aim for wide stuff. Fifths and sixths work really nicely, right? And so you can do things with patterns and stuff that can kind of add that kind of. Right, now I'll also jump to, I'm kind of throwing, I had a bunch of things on a list, but I'm actually kind of throwing them all together because I feel like it ends up, I developed instincts at this point, so I want to kind of show you how they might come out. So some of that was me throwing in a chord on purpose. You don't expect that in a single note melody. Now, of course, if it's like a vocal line, you're not going to be doing a chord. You'll have to throw in a harmony on a separate track. But a sudden, you know, ooh, harmony, didn't expect that. Just throw it in on like one note or two notes or something, or just a little piece of the melody. It's a great way to sort of, again, it's almost cheating because you're adding, it's like chord changes. You're adding extra harmony to it in that moment, or the way, you're adding impact to the way that note hits when it does hit. You can do that through extra depth and extra voices. So that's sort of another version of that. But okay, so anyway, there's a lot of sixths here, guys. I'm at the fifth. This is all E minor, fifth scale E minor. So I'm playing off of the sixths on two different strings. That's another way to play sixths with string skipping. Fourth string, fifth fret, and second string, fifth fret. It's like an inverted minor third. It's like an E minor with the third in the bass. Right? So, but I'm doing more melodic stuff with it, kind of trying to move around with it. So, like, come back down to it, slide down, slide into it. So this is where I'm also using phrasing techniques at the same time to purposely start from other notes in the scale and just at least momentarily introduce a couple extra ingredients as well. So it's not just F sharp, it's F sharp with a little bit of E introduced before it. I could do it that way too. And now when I introduce that F sharp, that's me, again, using the interesting chord change. It's not outside the key, but it's instead of B minor, I use the B major, which adds a little bit more intensity to it because it's from harmonic minor, and that raising the seventh of the scale creates a stronger pull back to the So having that half step right below, like just, I can tell I'm a half step away from the root. It just, it's a stronger pull toward, it's stronger tension that gets released, you know, back to the root. Okay, so, yeah. All right, so I like to go into like wider intervals. That's a really big one. All right, so again, call and response can kind of help too. I'm going to talk a little more about some things you can do with call and response. Okay, so I think it's really important to especially, that's probably one of the best tools I'm going to give you here tonight, is that. So let's say I'm playing over a B minor this time. And let's not pretend, let's hear it. Okay, so with that going on, all right, so you don't have to play your root note, especially if it's already in the chord. You don't need it in your melody too. So I'm going to go, I'm aiming for the fifth, but it's, you know, like one E and two. Well, let's just say it's quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And so it's an idea that the melody actually does start on the last beat before the measure, all right? But it's basically just, my root note is here. 6/5, 3/2. Now I'm going to do the 7 and the 6. And then let's just jump up high. So it's a bunch of neighboring notes. I'm going to jump back up, but I'm still going to descend. So in a way, the idea is a bunch of pairs of notes that descend one note. Okay, so to get to the call and response part, okay, good, I got my idea. I have 4 little ideas that make that work. Now, what I need is, probably the easiest way is to start again the same way, and then go somewhere else. Start somewhere else, but end differently, right? So that's where I think I did, so I'm playing off of all of the half steps in harmonic minor now. This is the 6/5, root, raised 7, which is really, really tense against that B. Let's hear that again. Still tense because I never really made, and now I'm 1 note away from the root note on the other side of it. So I'm on the root note, and then I play the next note next to it. So it's really clashy against the back and forth. Now it's the 3rd for a moment. Now the 2nd, so I just took away the resolution. 6/5. Again, I started on 6/5, and in the end I actually played again in the lower octave. All right, but it still has a full effect because I played so much stuff in between there. So. Right. So anyway, that's one way I could possibly make that kind of thing work. Let's try it with an actual beat too. Let's do it. 1, 2. Oops. Grab the other one. 2, 3. And if it was me, I would probably go in and sort of, experiment with which one of them I actually want to have come first. I almost feel like the one that I played second maybe should have gone first. I feel like maybe that could have gone a little bit better. Anyway, but that's part of the process that I'm talking about. Having a recording software going and trying these things out, being able to at least just record both of them in time to the music, like in time to the grid, and just cut it and move them around and visually switch them so that you can have them play back in a different order quickly, or even just enter it as MIDI just so you can hear it quickly and see how things are playing against each other. It's really an indispensable tool that you really should be using from the start, long before you think you're going to be recording and releasing music. It's not just for that. All right. So again, I just want to drive that home. But at the same time, I'm using guitar practice tools, which I built for this very purpose. This is exactly what these 2 tools together are for. So hopefully you're able to hear it all together. Excuse me. Drink time here. Yeah, hopefully you're able to hear everything fairly clearly. I'm going to actually skip out on these double bass beats and just go with something a little bit more like straight rock beat kind of thing. But yeah, all right. So there's a lot of stuff we can kind of do. Let's make sure these actually work. Hold on a minute. Good. Yeah. Okay. Had a little trouble with those before. All right. So now, all right. So far we've done a little bit call and response here. it's very easy to do call and response, by the way. So like, I'm just going to take a really simple melody. Let's go back to E minor for a second. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm just descending the scale from the fifth down to the root. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A quick way I could come up with a response to that is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Different last note. It doesn't have to be that different at all. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 7. All right, so anyway, and that can also help you choose your next chord too. So maybe it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 7. Playing the 5 chord in the background. I'm playing the B now. All right, that's the 5, E, F sharp, G, A, B. B is the chord, B, but I'm playing C, D. I'm playing D and it's my note, so 5, 6, 7, playing the third of that chord. So you can choose which chord's going to go with it once you figure out what your melody is going to be too. But it doesn't need to be that much harder than that. I mean, this is a very linear melody, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is, you know, it's okay. You can use it sometimes. I wouldn't use it all the time. But you know, like, you might. Another thing, I haven't said it yet in this episode, but sequences are a great way to start off with just using, you know, you can use a sequence for a moment to create something that kind of, you know, does what you want it to do without going forward, you know, using it so much that it's very clear you're doing a pattern. If you want to shred, you kind of have to use it a little bit more. But if you're trying to create a more singable, catchy, strong melody, you know, there's no reason why you can't use it for at least maybe 2 times. But if you use a sequence just twice, you might very well get away with it, not even being noticeable to the musicians listening, which is great, you know. So 3 is kind of the official cutoff. You don't really do a sequence more than 3 times, like a. So that by changing what I did on the 4th time, rather than going, you know, that would have been audibly the same thing. 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's the sequence of 4s, and I purposely did it 4 times in a row just so you can see how it turns into something that's an obvious pattern versus a melody. You know, so. Right, that turned into something else, and the pinch harmonic changed it even further. All right, but that way, in fact, I still did 4. I just went 7, 1, 2, 3, and came back down. So I changed something about it, but just doing like a bunch of descending sequence of 4, for example. After 3, it's time to stop. So a really good way to do it, to sneak them in, is just do it like twice. A sequence of thirds would be like basically just play 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5. You basically go up 2 notes, come back down, go up 2 notes, come back down. It's something you probably do on your own, even whether you knew it was a sequence or knew it was called the sequence of thirds anyway. It's something that a lot of us kind of, you know, in our quest to try to get notes to stop happening in the same order all the time. It's something you might have already stumbled onto, or just by picking it out of existing riffs. People use this a lot, and it's good. It's a useful tool. So it's not like it's, you know, if you came up with a riff and then found a band did that already, don't punish yourself. Keep your riff. It's okay to use the sequence of thirds or whatever. That's, you know, but that's what that's called. All right. So I might use like, all right. So let's do I'll do something in E minor, but with a C in the background. Let's just, you know, it's not just going to always be the root note chord. All right, so that would be C, E, G within my scale. All right, so there's a quick one. That's the sequence of thirds right there. 3, 1, 2, 7. And I come up one note. And now I'm purposely just going up high. And in fact, it's a C in the background. I'm playing a B. That happens to be a major 7, which typically, you know, C, the root note, is going to be much more, you know, locked in and final sounding. So the thing is, going from an E over a C is already sort of a C major. So when you play a C major, picture C, E. All right, play no more, right? That's the beginning. The rest would be, all right, but you don't need that much. Just those two notes, the root note and its third together, they impart most of what you need to get that major chord sound across. So if the root note is already there, and you just play the third, you pretty much have your major chord. You don't really need the fifth. And so, my melody note is E, the third. That's it. You don't need the fifth, which would have been G. And that would be the seventh. So it's root, third, fifth, major 7. Right? And with time creeping towards 9 o'clock, I'm starting to throw in another tool, which is ornamentation. And it's more phrasing, but it's, you know, so rather than instead of, I might do go up a note with pure legato, just rather than, I want to connect those notes, but I'm going to use the notes in between. And so I'm just using different iterations of the same note. That's just E, and then went up to the next E, so I'm just playing the third again, but it does have a new quality to it. It's, you know, more soaring. Purposely going up past the note. That's another thing I do a lot too. I find it's really useful is, if I know I'm going for a C, because that's the root note in the background, I'll ascend up. That's A. I could go to a B first, but I'm going to go straight to the C, but bend even past the target and come back. All right? So rather than just, well, that's fine, but it's not particularly inventive. So I like to, this is again the picture the melodic contour. When I hear that note I want to go for is way up there, but I have room to go further. Let's say I wanted to go even for the high E. Well, I can do like I can still bend even from my highest fret. So I'm going to go to the next note in the scale and then come back down to it. This is where bends are especially powerful. You can bend from the note that's actually your target tone, but bend to another note past it first. So you resolve to the same note, C. Resolve to the third of the chord. Resolve to the fifth of the chord. I'm starting with the note below it, So it's the root note, right? So start from the 7th, go to the root note and bend to the next note, and release. Here's the 3rd, right? So go to the note below it, D, bend the E to the F sharp, and then release it back to the 3rd. So I went to the 4th, the raised 4, this is Lydian. It's a nice dreamy kind of quality, right? Same thing from the F sharp, that note by itself, go to the G, which is the 5th, but bend to A, you can even bend again or tap like that in the middle of a bend, tap and then release. And pull off once you get to your G. So you can do some other kind of fun stuff. Same idea, but I'm adding an additional tap to whatever the interval above the note I'm bending to would be. So, and the fret might actually appear to be out of the key, but remember I'm bending, so it's sort of like a pitch shifter on a keyboard. The whole keyboard's moving up that interval, so it's, in each case it was a whole step. So yeah, that's going back to what I said. It's like almost cheating really, but it's starting with an interesting chord change. It also helps to have an interesting chord to begin with. So in this case, I'm playing very much off of the Lydian sound. So it can kind of get you out of regular old major and minor. It's just right in there. It's just a different mode. It's mode 6 of minor. If you like to think in minor keys, that's mode 6. If you like to think in major keys, that's mode 4. It's the same thing. It's the same sound. Your notes are going to be in the same location from it, but it's basically just the major scale with the 4th raised. So instead of let's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's an incredibly dissonant interval nestled right in between the nice sounds of a major chord. All right, so it's very, very useful, and it's got that nice dreamy sound that I know Joe Satriani has used it throughout his career a great deal. I love it also because it's also it complements very well to works very, very well going back and forth between Lydian, which is that dreamy, innocent kind of sound, and going very dark back into, in the same key, back to Aeolian, which would have been, mode 1. So going from C major in this case to E minor. All right, so let me kind of just run down the list here. I know we're a little past 9 o'clock, so I do need to go in a moment, but call and response, can't beat it. Come up, whatever you did the first time, play it again, but with a different ending. It's the easiest way you can possibly do it. There are other ways to do it, but move the whole idea up or down a mode, or do it in another octave even. But do something very much like what you just did, but a little differently the second time. Figure out then once you do that, figure out which one sounds like it sounds better first, and then which one sounds better coming after it. Experiment a little. Again, do it in a recording situation. You'll be happy you did. Second, pay attention to the melodic contour of your melody. That I can't overstate the importance of that. Having a little bit of a visual idea of what your melody is going to be shaped like means a lot. Do non-linear melodies. So like randomize the notes order a little bit. Try not to play your scale up and down anymore. Just don't do that. When you need a scale run, fine, then play your whole scale. All right, but until you really need speed, if it's a melody that doesn't stop the listener from humming along, but gets them to hum along. You know, the shred parts, that's when the person stops humming. But, you know, if they're supposed to be getting this addictive melody stuck in their head, then get out of the linear thing, at least some of the time. Throw a wider interval in there. In fact, wide interval jumps are suddenly surprising. So if I'm like, you know, that'll get your attention because I just jumped out of my octave. And then B, I jump past the next B to its sixth and fifth, right? So I'm in E minor, went all the way up to B and jumped into the next octave. That'll get your attention. That's surprising. People don't expect that kind of thing. So it's good for your solos and stuff like that too. All right. So wide interval jumps are surprising. Interestingly, harmonics can do that for you too. So, you know, like, ooh, hey, nice. You can suddenly just jump up 2 octaves out of nowhere without even moving your hand. You just make sure you pinch in the right spot. All right, so another one, of course, is the rhythmic interest and variation, or having a clear rhythmic idea underlying the whole thing, or how and when you want these notes to hit, so you can kind of see when they're also going to hit the chord changes as well, but especially the main beats. That's number 5. Number 6 is I forgot to mention this. You can use mini arpeggios as actually part of the melody, which I've kind of done here anyway. So let's say I'll go back to my E minor. All right, I'm improvising here, but root, third, root, third, fourth, seventh, fifth. One, two, three. One, two, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It is all built around arpeggio notes of the E minor chord. Root, third, fifth. Root, third, fourth, seventh. I just momentarily went outside of the chord and still finished on that. So I'm just doing 2 note per string arpeggio shapes to build a lot of my melody. So now, quick call and response. Just do the same thing, but just change the ending. Again, I can't overstate how easy it is to come up with call and response stuff. So there's another example. Okay, so using mini arpeggios, that's actually part of the melody. If you need another note, and the note you're playing is in the arpeggio of the chord that's going on right now, grab one of those other notes. Just make your life easier, because that's going to go great too. And then once in a while, throw some of the notes in between them in there. But notice, see how the different melodic contour came into that one, right? Again, that was a purely spontaneous melody centered around that shape there, but I went up here high, ascended, descended, lower, ascended, but not quite as high, mostly ascended up to my target note, but went past it and came back down. So I'm sort of going up, but then going up, but not as high, but going up again, but too high, and then I'm randomizing a little bit of it, but there's also a pattern in there. Go up from lower, go up from lower. There's, and I landed on a note that's in the chord. All right, so that's again, I can't stress that enough. In a way, that's kind of a sequence, but I'm building a theme. All right, so using sequences, I did that a little bit earlier. That's number 7. Using sequences as at least part of the melody, just a little bit before somebody catches on that you're using a pattern. That's a great one. Okay. 8. Throw in a chord once in a while. I did that earlier. You can just be like, just every once in a while, especially in your lead guitar stuff, Don't forget to play 2 notes at a time once in a while, maybe even 3. It's, you know, just at the right place, it can be very, very powerful. And don't forget, you don't have to just play 1 note all the time. And it can work really well. That even through thick distortion and stuff like that, it can actually work really well to have the quality of whatever interval you chose in that chord. So anyway, I'm calling it a chord. Any 2 notes played together technically isn't a chord, I know, but you know, a mini chord. All right. Next, number 9 is use phrasing techniques, kind of whenever possible. Bending, vibrato, sliding. If you have a whammy bar, you can do vibrato with that. You can do little dips and dives. You know, you can be all over that bar all the time if you want. Adding ornamentation. You know, that with trills, it could be just quick little rolls and stuff like that. Using notes that happen to be between the notes you're about to play and filling in with those notes of the scale in a rhythmic way. Yeah, ornamentation is its own whole beast, so you know, I'm not going to get into it now, but yeah, doing interesting things that still connect the notes you meant to connect, but doing some extra stuff in between. Short, brief stuff, but it makes a big difference. And then again, as I said, sort of the cheating, but having an interesting chord change to begin with, that makes a big, big difference. So I'm going to leave you with this one. This is one of my favorite ones, but it's like going from a, let's say I'm going to start in C minor this time, just so I can use my open B, right? So I might go like, so going from like a C minor to a B major, right? Root, no, sorry. C, E flat, and G. Now, when I go to a B major, the 3rd is still there, but it's a B, D sharp, F sharp. So once I actually hit the 3rd, it's now the 3rd of another chord. All right, so anyway, that's just one other thing. I just wanted one last illustration of how having an interesting chord change underlying it can make a really big difference in the melody that wouldn't have been particularly special if you didn't have that chord change. It's just simply 5th, root, 3rd, oh, 5th, root, 2nd, 3rd, but now the 3rd isn't the 3rd of the same chord it would have been, because I'm kind of playing a melody from the C minor scale, but by the time I get to the 3rd, I'm actually playing like B Lydian. So it's like, ooh, upset, I changed keys altogether there. All right, so anyway, yeah, I really can't stress that enough. Having interesting chord changes will make a huge difference in your melodies because they're reconciling those chord changes, which would have been maybe kind of really weird without them. But a nice singable melody that actually overlaps 2 different keys in just the right way like that is, you know, it's a lot more memorable. All right, so I'm going to go. I'm quite a bit over my normal time here, but I hope you got a lot out of this tonight. And again, sorry for bailing on you last week, but mystery illness took precedent. So anyway, hopefully you figure out what that is, but that's my problem, not yours. That said, I will see you again next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So rock on until then, my friends, with a recording software.